Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into something that, well, even after more than 50 years, still gets people talking, really talking. The 1969 Apollo 11 moon landing.
It really does. It's this huge moment in history, right? But the debate about whether it actually happened, it's still out there.
Absolutely. And you've probably heard the whispers, maybe even some loud arguments. Did they really go?
Uh-huh. And that's what we want to do today. Sort of unpack the whole thing, look at the main arguments, the science, the conspiracy side, and maybe figure out why it just won't go away.
Exactly. Let's set the scene first. July 20, 1969. Neil Armstrong. Those words.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Just iconic, broadcast everywhere.
Yeah, the whole world watching. It felt like this huge unifying moment for humanity, an incredible achievement.
Totally. A real landmark. But, almost straight away, people started questioning it. Little whispers of doubt began almost immediately.
Right. It wasn't just a general, wow, that's amazing. Specific things got picked up on pretty quickly.
Yeah, questions that for some people are still really valid today.
Like the flag, right? You've probably seen the picture. The American flag looks like it's, well, waving.
In a vacuum, how's that work? That was a big one early on.
And the photos. Why aren't there any stars? Space is full of stars, isn't it?
Good question. And the shadows, too. Sometimes they look like they're going in different directions. Not quite right.
So these little things started piling up, and then you get the more elaborate ideas.
Oh, yeah. The big one being that the whole thing was faked. Filmed on a soundstage somewhere.
Oh. And the name Stanley Kubrick often comes up in that context, the famous director.
It does, surprisingly often. The idea that he was hired to direct the performance, it's gained quite a bit of traction over the years, strange as it sounds.
Okay, so let's really dig into that side of it first. What are the main pillars holding up the hoax argument?
Well, the flag is definitely front and center. The argument is simple. No air on the moon, no wind. So a waving flag means...
It wasn't filmed on the moon. It had to be somewhere with an atmosphere, like Earth.
Precisely. That visual is very powerful for skeptics.
It does look odd at first glance, you have to admit.
Yeah.
Okay, what else?
Another major point is the landing site itself. Specifically, what's not there.
Meaning?
Meaning the big hole, the blast crater, you'd expect from the lunar module's engine as it landed. They argue that a powerful rocket should have kicked up a lot of dust and dug out a crater.
But the pictures don't really show that, just the lander sitting there.
Exactly. They say it looks like it was just gently placed there, maybe by a crane in a studio.
Interesting point. And you mentioned the photos earlier, the backgrounds.
Right. This is another big one. Critics point to photos that seem to have the exact same background hills or features, even though they were supposedly taken miles apart during different moonwalks.
So the suggestion is a limited set, like a painted backdrop in a film studio.
That's the claim, that the repetition proves it wasn't a vast lunar landscape, but a confined space.
Okay. And the lighting in the photos, too. That comes under fire.
It does. The argument is that the sun is the only light source up there, and it's incredibly harsh, direct light. So how are the astronauts, even in shadow, so perfectly lit?
You mean, how can you see details on the parts of the spacesuit that aren't in direct sunlight?
Yeah. Skeptics say it looks like studio lighting, fill lights used to make sure everything is visible, like in a movie production. Not like the single harsh light source you'd expect on the moon.
So if you put all those pieces together, the flag, the crater, the backgrounds, the lighting, what's the grand conclusion for the theorists?
The conclusion is that NASA, under huge pressure during the Cold War, faked the whole thing.
To beat the Soviets in the space race.
Primarily, yes. And also, to give America a massive boost in morale and prestige on the world stage. It was a politically charged time.
Okay. That lays out the core of the conspiracy theory pretty clearly. So now let's flip the coin. How does the scientific community respond? What's the evidence for it being real?
Right. Let's tackle those points directly, starting with the flag, that waving look.
Yeah, how do they explain that?
It's actually pretty straightforward engineering. The flag was mounted on a pole, but it also had a horizontal bar extending along the top edge.
To hold it out.
Exactly. To make sure it looked unfurled and visible in the still, airless environment. It had been folded up tightly for the journey, so the creases and wrinkles just stayed there, making it look rippled. It wasn't flapping. It was just stiffly hanging from that top bar.
Okay, that makes sense. Less like waving, more like rumpled. What about the missing stars? That's a common question.
That's down to basic photography, really. The lunar surface is incredibly bright in direct sunlight. So were the white spacesuits and the lander.
So the cameras were set for bright conditions,
Correct. The exposure settings, the shutter speed, and aperture were chosen to capture those bright objects properly. Stars are incredibly faint in comparison.
like trying to photograph stars during the daytime on Earth.
Pretty much. The camera just couldn't pick them up. The bright foreground completely overwhelmed the faint background starlight on the film.
Okay, understood. Now, the tricky one, the shadows. Why do they sometimes look like they're not parallel?
This mostly comes down to perspective and the ground itself. The moon isn't flat.
Right, it's got craters, hills, slopes.
Exactly. And shadows falling across uneven terrain can look distorted to us. Lines that are actually parallel can appear to converge or diverge because of the bumps and dips in the ground they fall on. It's an optical effect.
And isn't there another light source, technically?
Yes, that's important too. Earthshine. The Earth reflects a lot of sunlight back onto the moon. It's not as bright as direct sun, but it's enough to act as a sort of faint fill light, illuminating some shadow areas. That contributes to why shadows aren't pitch black and why things look the way they do.
So perspective, uneven ground, and earthshine explain the shadow anomalies. Beyond debunking those specific points, what's the bigger picture evidence?
Well, think about the sheer scale of Apollo. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people involved over a decade.
Engineers, scientists, technicians, contractors.
A massive workforce. The idea that you could fake something that complex, involving that many people, and keep it a perfect secret for over 50 years.
Without a single credible leak.
It just seems incredibly improbable. Statistically, almost impossible. The coordination required for the hoax would arguably be more complex than actually going.
That's a fair point. The human element of keeping such a secret seems insurmountable.
And we have newer evidence now too, right? From orbit.
We do. This is really compelling. NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, or LRO, has been mapping the moon in high detail since 2009.
And it's photographed the landing sites.
Yes, in incredible detail. You can clearly see the descent stages of the lunar modules left behind by the Apollo missions. You can see the tracks made by the lunar rovers on later missions. You can even make out the faint paths where the astronauts walked.
Actual physical evidence still sitting on the moon photographed decades later. Irrefutable photographic evidence from an independent, modern source.
And then there's the stuff they brought back, the souvenirs.
The best souvenirs ever. 382 kilograms, that's about 842 pounds of moon rocks and soil samples collected across the 6 landings.
And these aren't just sitting in a NASA vault.
Oh no. These samples have been shared with scientific institutions all around the world for independent study, including labs in countries that weren't exactly friendly with the U.S. back then, like the Soviet Union.
And what did they find?
Universally, the analysis confirmed these rocks are unique. They have isotopic signatures, mineral compositions, and formation histories that are distinctly non-terrestrial. They match meteorite samples believed to be from the moon, but they're different from anything found naturally on Earth. They are moon rocks.
Okay, so you have the scale argument, the LRO images, the moon rocks verified globally. The scientific case seems really solid. So why? Why does the hoax theory still have such a hold on some people?
That shifts us into psychology, really. Conspiracy theories often have a strong appeal because they offer simple, albeit dramatic, explanations for events that are either very complex or just hard to believe.
And landing on the moon in 1969. That was definitely hard to believe for many. Still is, maybe.
It was an extraordinary leap. So extraordinary that, for some, the idea of an elaborate fake feels, perhaps counterintuitively, more graspable than the reality of the achievement itself. It imposes a simpler, more manageable narrative, even if it's a negative one.
And maybe a general distrust of government plays into it.
Definitely. If you already have a baseline distrust of official institutions or the authorities, then a narrative about a massive government cover-up becomes much easier to accept. Media portrayals, movies about conspiracies, they can also blur lines and make these ideas seem more plausible over time.
It's almost like the achievement was too big, too incredible for its time.
That's a big part of it, I think. Even today, thinking about the technology of the 1960s, sending people to the moon and back safely, it feels almost science fiction. So imagining it was faked can, weirdly, feel less demanding than accepting the sheer brilliance and effort involved.
So let's think about the implications. What if, hypothetically, it was all a fake? What would that mean?
Oh, the fallout would be catastrophic. Imagine the erosion of trust. Not just in NASA, but in science itself, in physics, in our understanding of the universe. History books rewritten, decades of scientific work questioned. It would be a fundamental blow to our knowledge base.
A real crisis of confidence in human capability and scientific endeavor.
Absolutely. But on the other hand, accepting the overwhelming evidence that it did happen.
Then it stands as this incredible testament to what humans can achieve.
Exactly. A monument to ingenuity, cooperation, bravery, and our fundamental drive to explore. It validates the scientific method and shows the power of aiming for seemingly impossible goals.
It's quite a stark contrast. Either a profound achievement or a profound deception.
It really is. And, regardless of where you personally land on this, the fact that we're still talking about it, debating it, questioning it,
That itself has value.
I think so. It keeps the event alive in our minds. It encourages critical thought, hopefully, and it definitely fuels our curiosity about space, about history, about what's real and what isn't. The debate itself keeps us engaged with a pivotal moment.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, it really comes back to a personal evaluation. We've laid out the conspiracy claims, the scientific counters, the evidence,
Yeah, the waving flag, the missing stars, the shadows, the crater, countered by the flag's design, the camera settings, the terrain, earthshine.
plus the sheer scale, the LRO images, the hundreds of kilos of verified moon rocks.
It's a lot to weigh up.
So the final question is really for you listening right now. Having heard all this, where do you stand? What's your conclusion on the 1969 moon landing?
There's no single answer we can give you, obviously. It's about looking at the information available.
And we really encourage you to keep digging if you're interested. Look at the sources, check out the LRO images online, read the analyses of the moon rocks, form your own informed view on this debate that just keeps going.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.